Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. All right, first question. Hey Jason, I've been doing floor press for quite high volume as an assistance to my bench and overhead press. My question is, will I get the training response I want from doing this? I don't like doing tricep extensions and or any fluff exercises for my chest, so will this be adequate? Cheers. Yeah, that's really going to be hard to answer. Because you're combining it with the overhead press, you can get a lot of mileage out of this. In other words, it is one of the better assistance movements. The floor press is in and of itself a solid strength and mass builder all the way around. It's a good exercise. That being said, getting enough total tricep volume can be a problem. However, the standing press does add some extra tricep volume while taking some of the load off the chest, so it lets you get more total volume in. You can get a lot of mileage out of this. However, here's what I'm going to say in my experience. Just use me as an example. I'm not saying I'm the perfect example of what I've had to do this year. I've started having to do more direct tricep work. I've used all these lifts. I've used all 3 of these lifts. You've seen me build my press up to 225 strict. You've watched me bench well over 300. You've seen me floor press over 300. I still had lagging triceps. So here's what these things are going to come down to. You can get a lot of mileage. You can get a lot of mileage out of them. However, the more advanced you get, you may reach a point to where your total training volume that you need to get an adequate training response might require you to do some additional tricep work or some additional fluff work for your pecs. It doesn't have to be fluff. I'm not telling you it has to be pump work. But you might have to do some smaller exercises to bring up a weak link for a while. Now, does it mean you need to be doing it right now? No. You probably don't need to do anything like that to get your bench up to 300, get your standing press up to 200, things like that. You probably don't need to do so. However, if you are trying to maximize strength, you will eventually reach a threshold to where you probably will need to do so. Right? Just accept it. It is what it is. Not a big deal. All right, next question. What do you think about chest flies for gaining size? Should we ever do them, and when? We kind of come back to that first question. Address that. Do I think most of you are probably ever going to need flies or particularly benefit from them? Probably not. Pretty good chunk of lifters never will. Let's call it like it is. Can I say that eventually you might not reach a point to where you'll benefit from them? No, you very well might. And what we need to think about in terms of these smaller exercises in general, and this is why we can't be dogmatic about this. I've had to quit being dogmatic about this stuff. Almost every single muscle in your body has the potential at some point to require additional workload to balance your strength, musculature, everything else. Right? All of them have the potential to, depending upon how your training and structure goes. So if you eventually reach a point to where your pecs are becoming a weak link in your pressing and everything else, it might be prudent. Now, people say, what about for hypertrophy? Probably not necessary for general hypertrophy. Because usually when we're adding in smaller exercises, why are we doing it? Because we've reached our maximum recoverable volume and stuff for some of the other muscles involved in the big lifts. In other words, if you can't do more incline and more dips because your front delts are a limiting factor, or now your triceps have somehow become a limiting factor, then you might benefit from some. When you're dealing with, again, the total training volume of what you can handle on the big lifts, you might need to do some smaller lifts for something like your chest, some sort of fly. It might be beneficial at a certain threshold. Where I have a problem with exercises like this is people thinking they need to isolate everything. That's a problem. And I don't mean isolate, let's say smaller joint exercises. Look, if you think that you need to train your triceps, your front delts, and your pecs, all the smaller exercises, you just aren't doing enough pressing. So we're talking about total muscle balance and weak link training. There comes a threshold to where at any given time, especially for an advanced lifter, you're probably going to have to do a smaller exercise for one of those, no matter what's happening. It's going to be a question of which it is. It's more likely to be your triceps. But is it very possible for even for someone who is got good chest development for eventually their chest to benefit from a supplemental lift for a phase? It very well might be. And that's the way you have to look at it. So again, do they have their place? Sure. For the vast majority of listeners out there who are still working on getting to a 300 bench, this probably shouldn't be on your radar. For a more advanced lifter, possibly, yeah. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. I train in a commercial gym full of weak people. There's part of your problem. Who don't know how to train. Each time I bench press, they tell me that it hurts the back and I should do flat back, and it pisses me off. What should I say to them? Tell them that you appreciate their advice, but you really don't need advice from weak people. That there's plenty of data that suggests a small arch causes more pectoral recruitment than flat back, and that there is no reason for anyone to ever bench press with a flat back. It's not useful, it's not beneficial, it's not what they should be doing. Outside of that, ignore them. You need to ignore them and try to block them out. When you're dealing with weak people in the gym, unless they're there to give you someone to talk to and help between your sets, you need to block them out. You need to learn to block them out. You need to learn to ignore them. And if anything, if it becomes a problem for your training when you start to become really serious, depending upon how you are influenced by other people, depending upon how introverted versus extroverted you are, you may need to actually wear a cap so that you can't see what they're doing. Because for certain people, you can be negatively influenced by just seeing weak people do stupid shit around you. It can actually hurt your own programming for your training. Actually seeing them or knowing they exist or seeing what they do can be harmful to your results. And that's something that you do see some of the best coaches and champions out there do point that out, that they avoid those gyms purely because it can hurt their training. Like if you're surrounded by people who suck, you're going to suck. You need to be training in a place where there are people stronger than you. If you deadlift 700 pounds, you need to find a gym where people are deadlifting 800. That's part of the reason we have these terrible strength standards when people hear me say things like, you should be able to deadlift 400 pounds in your first year. Like, how could you make a blanket statement? Oh, how could you say that you're not accounting for all this individual stuff? Yeah, the thing I'm not accounting for is that you guys train at gyms full of shitty, weak, stupid people who are lazy and don't know how to train. That's the only variable we're not accounting for. But that's because you chose to put yourself in that environment. And that's why you're not deadlifting 400. If you just trained at home and didn't see all those weak people to influence you, you would have no problem reaching a 400 deadlift inside of your first year in the gym. It's because you surrounded yourself with weak, lazy people that it influenced you negatively to think that. And if you weren't in that environment, no healthy young man would ever have a problem benching 225 or deadlifting 405 in their first year. Notice I said healthy. It would never be even a topic. It'd never be a concern if you weren't influenced by weak people already around you. If you trained by yourself, just under the tutelage of a coach, you followed a program and didn't see other people, you would never know that it's not normal. Because that's what would happen with your training, and it would be your normal response. You got to learn to block these people out, though. You have to. They will drag you down and keep you from getting strong. All right, next question and last question of the week. Hey, Jason, can the floor press replace a bench press as a primary movement? Will it give similar chest development? I'm going to say yes and no. I'm going to say it depends. Would I recommend it long term? No. No, absolutely not, particularly not for someone who's not thick enough to touch their chest on the floor press. I can touch my chest on the floor press. I can get away with it. I still wouldn't do it. Now, do I think that for a phase of training you could? If you wanted to just get better on your stricter bench and you had a thick enough chest to pull it off, could you do it for a phase? Sure. I have a problem with it. If you don't have access to a good bench, hell, if I had a novice, if I was coaching someone and they trained at home with a rack and they didn't have a bench, now I'm going to question how can they afford my coaching and not be able to afford a bench. But assuming that that's the situation, would I put them on a floor press? In a heartbeat? In a heartbeat. I am concerned, though, with the lack of being able to get a stretch reflex. I would like to see a weighted dip or something in there. In other words, could I sub out the bench press for a lifter who's doing the floor press and has access to dipping bars? Sure. But I'm going to want something that gets that stretch reflex in there. I'm going to want something that gets it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.